Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's story is about Kale, a washed-up rescue worker who gets punished for doing the right thing, thrown into an alien prison, and dragged before the ruthless Clisari Queen, only to discover she's the very same golden-eyed girl he once saved in the burning ruins of Arx Varos 7 years ago. The lesson hits hard. Real honor isn't obedience, it's compassion when nobody is watching. One brave act of kindness can echo for years and change the fate of entire nations. And even in a universe built on prejudice and propaganda, choosing to see an enemy as a person can become the first step toward peace, redemption, and a second chance at purpose. Have you ever been punished for doing the right thing? That's exactly what was happening to Kale. If you want to know how one single act of kindness landed him in an alien prison light years from home, you're going to want to stick around. The hallway seemed to go on forever, and the footsteps of his alien captors bounced off walls that glowed with a weird, living light. Kale stared straight ahead, trying to ignore the sharp pain that shot up his arms every time the heavy shackles moved. The Clisari guards on either side of him moved like water, their long limbs slicing through the air. "Move faster, human," one of them hissed, its voice coming through a translator as a flat robotic monotone. But even a machine couldn't hide the pure contempt in its voice. "The interrogators do not like to be kept waiting." Kale kept his mouth shut. After 3 days in this place, he'd learned that silence was his only friend. The whole situation was a joke. They were accusing him of espionage. Seriously? As if a washed-up rescue worker from Earth's orbital stations had any way, or any reason, to spy on the powerful Clisari Empire. But this far from home, logic didn't mean much. He was a tiny speck in a system where Earth was just a myth. As they rounded a corner, Kale saw his reflection in a polished black wall. The guy looking back at him looked way older than his 38 years. His dark hair was a greasy mess, and 3 days of interrogation had etched new lines of exhaustion onto his face. The standard-issue prisoner jumpsuit was hanging off his tired frame. But his gray eyes were still sharp, still defiant. They had taken his freedom. They had tried to crush his dignity, but they hadn't broken him. Not yet. They turned down another hallway, and this one looked different. The walls swooped up in strange, dizzying spirals, and glowing purple veins pulsed through the structure, a signature of Clisari design. It was beautiful in a creepy alien sort of way. As they walked, Kale let his mind drift. It was a bad habit, letting his guard down like that. But he couldn't help it. It was his brain's way of escaping the nightmare he was in. He wasn't thinking about the interrogation ahead. He was thinking about the past. About another time he'd walked through an alien city, but under completely different skies. The memory hit him out of nowhere, as sharp as it was 7 years ago. Back before his career went down in flames, before he was blacklisted and forced to take any job he could find on the edge of space. Back when he wore the uniform of the Earth Coalition Rescue Corps with pride. His ship was called the Mercy of Solace, a name that turned out to be a cruel joke when its engines blew apart while orbiting a war-torn planet. The world below was a battlefield, just one of dozens in the unofficial war between humans and the Clisari Empire. Officially, there was peace. In reality, both sides were fighting dirty over planets rich in resources. Kale was on the emergency response team, shot down toward the planet in a tiny pod, while the Mercy of Solace disintegrated above. The mission was supposed to be simple: find any human survivors from the wreckage and get them out. Simple, that is, until they landed smack in the middle of a city called Arx Varos. From the pictures he'd seen, the ancient city was once a masterpiece, full of crystal towers and bridges that literally sang in the wind. But war doesn't care about beauty. By the time Kale's pod punched through the smoky sky, the city was a graveyard. He could still smell it sometimes when he closed his eyes. The sharp stench of melting crystal and the sickly sweet smell of burning alien plants. He could still hear the tortured scream of metal as ancient buildings folded in on themselves. And through it all was the electric smell of plasma fire. His team got scattered during the descent, their pods thrown off course by the heat rising from the burning city. Kale crashed hard in what used to be a marketplace, his pod tearing through a wall before coming to a stop. By the time he cut himself out, he was totally alone. The rules were clear. Get to the extraction point, do not engage the locals, and only rescue human survivors. But rules don't always account for reality. And reality, for Kale, was finding a young Clisari girl trapped under a heavy crystal beam. She was young. You could tell by the panic in her eyes. The Clisari look ageless with their bluish skin and metallic eyes, but her frantic struggling told him she was just a kid. For a split second, Kale froze. His training screamed at him. She's the enemy. Her people shot down your ship. Leave her. But then she looked right at him, her big yellow eyes filled with terror and pain. And in that moment, he didn't see an enemy. He saw a scared kid who was about to die alone. So Kale made a choice that would screw up the rest of his life. The beam was incredibly heavy, and he had to rig up a makeshift lever to even budget. All the while, the girl just watched him, her lips moving, speaking words his translator couldn't understand. The Clisari language had countless dialects, and military translators only knew the main ones. But he didn't need a translator to see the sheer gratitude in her eyes when the heavy beam finally lifted, or to hear the sharp gasp she made as blood rushed back into her pinned legs. She was hurt bad. A long, deep cut on her side was leaking that strange silver blood the Clisari have. Kale quickly grabbed his emergency med kit, watching the biofoam seal the wound just as easily as it would on a human. When she tried to stand, she collapsed in a heap. Something was wrong with her left leg, maybe broken or nerve damage from being crushed. And that's when things got truly dangerous. The sounds of a firefight started echoing through the destroyed city. It was the unmistakable sizzle of energy weapons and the high-pitched whine of military hovercraft. Somebody's army was sweeping the area, and Kale wasn't about to stick around to find out who. He made another split-second decision, one that went way beyond just setting her free. He scooped the injured girl up. She was shockingly light, her species' hollow bones making her feel almost like a bird in his arms. He carried her deeper into the maze of ruins, moving away from the growing sounds of battle. They found shelter inside what looked like it might have been an old temple, or maybe a library. With Clisari buildings, it was always hard to be sure. It was half collapsed, but still offered them a place to hide. Kale set her down gently, watching her bite her lip to keep from crying out in pain. She was a tough kid. Just as he was about to leave, she grabbed his arm, her grip shockingly strong. She started talking fast in her own language, pointing at herself, then at him, then shaking her head as she made a walking motion with her fingers. The message couldn't be clearer. She couldn't walk, and she couldn't escape on her own. Kale tried to explain that he had his own mission, his own people, to save. He showed her the countdown on his wrist display. 3 hours until the rescue ships left for good. 3 hours to find any human survivors and get across the burning city. He couldn't afford to play bodyguard for an enemy civilian. But she wouldn't let go of his arm. And looking into her eyes, he saw a fear that went beyond war or species. It was the fear of being abandoned, of dying all alone in the ashes of her world. "Damn it," Kale muttered. He knew she couldn't understand him, but he had to say it. He switched on his emergency beacon, a huge risk that could attract the enemy, and settled in to wait, his rifle ready. They sat there for an hour in that ruined temple, the silence broken only by the distant sounds of war and her quiet, pained breaths. She tried to redress her own wounds with trembling hands, and Kale found himself kneeling down to help her, showing her how to use his human medical supplies. At one point, she pulled a small, miraculously unbroken device from her pocket. It was a hollow projector. The image that flickered to life showed a family. The girl was there, looking younger, surrounded by tall Clisari in fancy robes. Her parents, maybe? She pointed to each one, saying their names in a language he didn't know, her voice cracking when she pointed to an older man with kind eyes. Then, the projector flickered one last time and died, its battery finally giving out. The girl clutched that little photograph to her chest like it was her last hope. I got it. In that picture, everyone she loved was probably gone. The building they were smiling in front of? I'd just passed its smoking skeleton on my way there. That's when my suit's alarm blared a split second before the world came apart. It wasn't a ground assault. It was pure annihilation from the sky. Someone decided to just wipe the whole sector off the map instead of fighting for it. Plasma mortars fell like acid rain, and the very air started to cook. I didn't think, I just moved, diving to cover the girl as the first shells hit. The old temple walls gave us some cover, but not enough, as superheated shards of crystal and steel filled the air like a blizzard from hell. I never forgot the feeling of that one piece that punched right through my armor, just under my shoulder blade. It was a searing spike of pain that almost buckled my knees, but I held my ground, using my own body as a shield, while the universe exploded around us. It felt like an eternity, but my suit's clock later said it was less than 2 minutes. 120 seconds of agony that turned my back into a mangled mess of burns and embedded shrapnel. By the time it stopped, I was barely hanging on. I could feel the girl trying to push me off of her, wanting to see how bad I was hurt. Through a fog of pain and combat stims, I saw her face, streaked with soot and her people's silver blood, but she was alive. She was alive because of a choice I made. She was talking a mile a minute, her wide yellow eyes a mix of terror and maybe awe. Her hands fluttered over my back, and then I felt something cool spreading across the wounds. Some kind of Clisari medical gel, I figured, probably salvaged from the wreckage. It eased the burning a little. Just then, my rescue beacon finally paid off. A human shuttle, thank God, dropped out of the sky, its engines blowing away the smoke and ash. I tried to get up, to wave, but my legs weren't listening. So the girl did it for Amy. She stood up, ignoring her own injuries, and waved her arms frantically at our ride. The last thing I remember clearly is the medics loading me onto a stretcher. The girl held my hand, her grip surprisingly strong, until they had to gently pull her away. She kept repeating the same thing, over and over. My suit's translator was shot, but it caught a few fragments. We will not forget. Never forget. Then the painkillers dragged me into darkness, and the girl with the yellow eyes became a memory. I woke up 3 weeks later in a military hospital, my back a patchwork quilt of scars and skin grafts. The debriefing was short and cold. I had disobeyed a direct order, put the mission at risk, and gambled human lives for an enemy civilian. It didn't matter that there were no other human survivors in that sector, or that my delay hadn't actually cost a single friendly life. They didn't care. I got a quiet discharge, my service record sealed. No court-martial. That would mean admitting a human soldier had saved one of them, a Clisari. And in this war, neither side wanted that kind of messy story. They just erased me. A whole life of service, gone with the stroke of a pen. I never found out what happened to her. Shortly after they pulled me out, command glassed the entire sector from orbit. Everything within 100 kilometers was turned into radioactive desert. I always told myself she was gone, that I'd only bought her a few more hours of life. But sometimes late at night, I couldn't help but wonder. And now, walking down this alien hallway toward a room where they were probably going to kill me, I was thinking about choices. About that moment when all the rules and training fall away, and you're left with one simple question. Who are you, really? "Quit spacing out, human," one of the guards growled, shoving me hard. "We're here." The hallway opened into a massive chamber that stole my breath. This was no interrogation room. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into living shadows, and the polished floor reflected strange, purple lights in a way that made my head spin. "It's a throne room," I muttered without thinking, which earned me a sharp crack across the back from a guard's rifle. "Silence! You are accused of crimes against Her Majesty. You will speak only when spoken to. Her Majesty. The Queen of the Clisari Empire. I'd seen her picture, sure. Everyone in human space had. She took the throne 5 years ago and brought a whole new level of aggression to their expansion. The intelligence reports called her young, brilliant, and completely ruthless. And for some reason, she was personally interested in me. That changed everything. You don't bring a petty spy before the Queen. This meant they either thought I was someone much more important, or they were planning to make an example out of me. A human spy, caught deep in their territory, publicly executed by the Queen herself. Yeah, that would send a message. The guards forced me to my knees right at the entrance to the main throne room. The impact sent a jolt of pain up my legs, but I kept my expression a perfect mask of stone. I'd be damned if I'd give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. "The accused will wait," one of them announced. "Touch nothing, say nothing. Any mistake will be your last." They flanked me, their weapons held at a casual, ready position. So I waited, my mind drifting back through the years. 7 years. It had been 7 years since that day on Aris Varos. 7 years of floating from job to job on the grimy edges of the galaxy. Hauling cargo, mostly. A little emergency rescue work when I could get it, but my blacklisted file made that tough. I was a ghost, living in the shadow of the soldier I used to be. And now, it was all going to end here, in an alien throne room, light years from anything I'd ever called home. There was a dark sort of poetry in that, I guess. The man who threw his life away to save an enemy was about to be killed by that same enemy. The universe has a sick sense of humor. Time crawled by. It was impossible to tell how long, minutes or hours. My knees were completely numb when a flicker of movement finally caught my eye. Courtiers, dozens of them, were silently filing in from side passages, lining the walls. They wore elaborate robes that seemed to change color with every step. Their faces were blank, but I could see the tension in the way they held themselves. This wasn't just another Tuesday at the palace. Then came the military officers, their rank obvious from the subtle armor woven into their uniforms. They stood apart from the courtiers, a clear line drawn between the politicians and the soldiers. Funny how some things are the same no matter where you go in the galaxy. Then a sound began. It wasn't music, not like humans know it. The Clisari hear things differently, in frequencies that would make our ears bleed. My translator did its best, turning it into a deep, vibrating hum that felt like it was coming from the very stone of the walls. A voice boomed, "All kneel for Her Radiant Majesty, Shield of the Seven Systems, Voice of the Crystal Throne, Queen Zara of the Clisari Empire." In a single flowing motion, the entire court dropped to the floor, a wave of bodies that left me as the only one not completely prostrate. The guards next to me stiffened, but I was already on my knees, so they let it be. She appeared from behind the throne, stepping out of a shadow that I hadn't even realized was a doorway. The intel photos were a joke. They didn't capture an ounce of her presence. She was tall, even for a Clisari, and moved with a liquid grace that made it seem like she was floating. Her skin was the familiar blue of her people, but a darker shade, like a midnight ocean. A cascade of what looked like spun silver fell down her back, catching the purple light and scattering it in shimmering waves. But it was her eyes that made my heart stop. They were golden yellow, the color of molten metal. They scanned the room with a terrifying intelligence, and when that gaze swept over me, I felt a familiar chill run right down my scarred back. This was not a person you ever underestimated. She sat on the throne, and the strange music faded into silence. The silence stretched on for what felt like an hour. Then she spoke, her voice just like the stories said, as beautiful and as cold as the void between stars. "Bring the accused forward." The guards hauled me to my feet. My legs, numb from kneeling, barely worked. I forced myself to walk, to keep what little dignity I had left as my shackles clanked with each step. The sound echoed in the massive hall, a lonely rhythm marking my isolation. They stopped me about 20 feet from the throne, close enough for her to see me, far enough that I couldn't possibly be a threat. Not that I could do anything. The shackles weren't just metal. They were designed to deliver a paralyzing shock if I so much as twitched the wrong way. "State your name for the record," one of the military officers barked. Cale stood up as straight as the restraints would let him. If this was how he was going to go out, he'd at least do it on his own 2 feet. "Cale Marcus Thorne, former lieutenant, Earth Coalition Rescue Corps. Current gig, independent cargo hauler. Serial number." "That's enough." The Queen's voice sliced through his words like a laser. "We couldn't care less about your old military ranks. You're accused of spying, of collecting intel on Clisari military bases. What's your answer?" The smart move would have been to beg, to throw himself at the mercy of the court, maybe plead that it was all a big mistake. But Cale had never been very smart when it came to saving his own skin. "My answer is that your intelligence agency needs a serious upgrade if they think a beat-up freighter hauling medical supplies is a spy ship." A wave of shocked gasps swept through the courtroom. The military officers stiffened up like statues. Even the guards next to him took a half step back, as if his nerve might be catching. But the Queen, she just tilted her head, her golden eyes narrowing. "So you're claiming you're innocent?" "I'm claiming I'm annoyed," Cale shot back, some wild part of him figuring if he was going down, he might as well have some fun with it. 3 days in your lockup, no lawyer, no call to my own government, and no real charges other than some vague nonsense. Back in human territory, we have a word for that. Kidnapping. "You are not in human territory," the Queen shot back, her voice tinged with something he couldn't quite place. Was it anger? Or was it fun? With the Clisari, you could never tell. "You were caught in a restricted star system. Your ship was loaded with surveillance gear." "You mean navigation sensors? Every ship has them. Or did your people forget how to fly without crashing into things? Last I checked, avoiding asteroids wasn't espionage." The words just tumbled out of him, years of frustration finally boiling over. "Then again, the last time I was in a Clisari building, I got a medal. This time, I get chains." "Funny how the universe works." Another murmur rippled through the onlookers, but this time the Queen went perfectly still. "You've been in a Clisari facility before?" Cale let out a short, bitter laugh that bounced off the crystal walls. "Not officially, no. That whole mess got buried in a classified file. Can't have the public finding out a human soldier was pulling Clisari civilians from the wreckage of their own cities. Can we? It might mess with the whole evil enemy story." "When?" The word was sharp, so urgent that everyone in the room snapped to attention. "When and where?" 7 years ago. A city called Arx Varos. Not that it makes a difference now." The change in her was like a lightning strike. The Queen launched to her feet, a move so abrupt that guards all over the room instinctively reached for their weapons. Her eyes were wide, the gold in them seeming to glow. "Your voice," she whispered, but somehow that whisper echoed through the enormous hall. "Say something else. Say anything." Cale just frowned, completely baffled by what was happening. "I don't understand what—" "More!" The command cracked through the air. Cale found himself instinctively obeying the authority in her voice. "Last time I walked into a palace, they gave me a medal for valor. This time, I get put in chains. That's my life story for you. No good deed ever goes unpunished." And then she was moving, striding down from her throne, past the stunned guards who looked like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. The Queen of the Clisari Empire never left her throne during a trial. She definitely never walked up to a prisoner. But here she was, closing the distance between them, with long, determined steps, her fancy robes flowing out behind her. "Your Majesty," one of the officers stammered, "this is extremely improper." Silence. She didn't even spare him a glance, her eyes locked on Cale with a look so intense it made him want to back away. "Everyone get out! Now! But Your Majesty, the prisoner, get out! The words hit with such power that the crystals embedded in the walls actually vibrated with a soft chime. Guards, officers, courtiers, everyone. Leave us! The room emptied in a rush of barely controlled panic. The court members scrambled out, trying to keep some shred of their dignity. The military officers backed away slowly, their hands hovering over their weapons, torn between their duty to protect their queen and her direct order to leave her alone with him. The guards holding Kale just looked confused until she flicked her wrist at them. The restraints. Take them off. Your Majesty, one of the guards tried to argue. He could be a threat. She spun to face him, and whatever he saw in her expression made him rush to unlock the shackles. They fell to the floor with a loud clang that seemed to echo forever in the now silent throne room. And then they were alone. The queen of the Clisari Empire and a washed-up human pilot standing in a massive crystal hall that suddenly felt way too small. She was just staring at his face with those incredible golden eyes, studying every line, every old scar. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all its royal authority. It sounded raw, almost fragile. Varos. The market district. There was a temple there. It used to sing when the wind blew, before the bombs hit. She took another step closer. You found someone in the rubble. A girl, trapped under a mountain of crystal and stone. Kale's heart was suddenly pounding against his ribs, his mind struggling to catch up. How could she possibly know that? Unless... She smiled, and the expression completely changed her. The cold royal mask vanished. In its place was a face he knew, a face he'd only seen once before, covered in dust and blood and tears. You carried me, she said, her voice barely a whisper. When my leg was broken, when the soldiers were getting closer, you could have left me. You should have. Your own ride was waiting, but you carried me to a safe place. You even stayed with me when the next round of bombs started to fall. No. The word was so quiet he could barely hear it himself. Kale stared at her, trying to see past the crown and the fancy clothes, past all the years, searching for the girl with the golden eyes who had squeezed his hand so tightly before they loaded him onto the rescue ship. You died. They bombed the whole city block into glass. They said there were no survivors. There was one. She reached a hand out, pausing just before she touched his arm, as if she was afraid he was a ghost. A terrified girl who refused to let go of the strange alien who saved her. A girl who spent 7 years digging through secret military files, just trying to find a name to match the voice she heard in her dreams. But you're the queen! Kale's voice faded as the impossible puzzle pieces slammed into place. A young royal, hidden away during a fight for the throne. The bombing at Varos wasn't random. It was a hit. And he had walked right into it and saved the one person they were trying to kill. I was Princess Soraya back then, not that you would have known, she explained. 16th in line for the throne, hidden away for my own safety, while my family tore itself apart. Her hand finally rested on his arm. After you saved me, after my loyal guards found me, everything was different. The story of the lost princess who survived the attack at Varos. It became a legend people rallied around. Within 2 years, I was the heir to the throne, Hamsu the Kua. Within 5, I was queen. Because of that day, Kale said, the full weight of it finally hitting him. Because of you, she corrected, her fingers tightening on his arm. I tried so hard to find you. For years I searched, but your mission was classified. The records were sealed. All I had was a voice and a face I couldn't forget. Do you have any idea how many human military databases I secretly hacked? How many favors I had to call in, just to find one soldier who was there? Kale started to laugh, a wild, disbelieving sound. And instead of finding me, you had me arrested for spying. The universe really does have a twisted sense of humor. She was still looking at him as if he might vanish at any second. When my officers told me they'd caught a human in a restricted zone, I almost didn't bother coming. Just another smuggler, they said. But something told me I had to see for myself. Imagine being punished for saving a life. That's exactly what happened to Kale, a soldier who threw away his entire career for a complete stranger. 7 years later, he's standing before the most powerful woman in the galaxy, and he's about to find out that one single act of kindness changed everything. Stick around to see how this outcast gets the ultimate redemption. I've been waiting 7 years to hear that voice again, the Queen said, her voice cracking the silence of the throne room. Kale was stunned. He'd just broken protocol by speaking out of turn, but she didn't care. "Protocol be damned," she whispered, a very unroyal phrase that made her smile. "The worst part," she confessed, "was never being able to thank you. Never telling you that the scared girl you saved went on to unite an empire." "People are going to talk," he said. "The queen of the entire Klasari Empire doesn't just clear her court to have a private chat with a prisoner. Let them talk." Still, she took a step back, the mask of a ruler falling back into place over her face. But it wasn't a perfect fit this time. A certain warmth, a softness, lingered in her eyes. "We have bigger things to worry about. You've been accused of being a spy. Some people in my government are itching to make an example out of you." "So what's next? A royal pardon?" he asked. "That's not going to sit well with your military leaders." She smiled, and this time, it had a sharp edge to it. "Oh, I have something much better than a simple pardon in mind. Tell me, Kale Marcus Thorne, how would you like to have your old life back?" "I don't know what you mean," he said. "Your military commission, your rank, all the honor that came with it." She started to pace, and in her movements he saw the sharp political mind that had leapfrogged her from 16th in line all the way to the throne. Imagine a joint human Klasari rescue team, officially approved, working to save people on both sides of the border, led by the human who saved the Klasari queen and proved that kindness isn't limited to one species. Kyle just stared at her. "That's crazy. Neither government would ever agree to it." "The war hawks on both sides would have a very hard time arguing against a program that saves lives," she said, her smile getting wider, especially when it's backed by both the Klasari throne and some forward-thinking groups in the Earth Coalition. "I've been working on a plan like..." Kale's hand instinctively went to his back, where the scars from that day still ached when the weather turned cold. "My sacrifice?" he asked, confused. "I didn't know you were royalty. I just saw someone who needed help." She moved closer, tears shining in her golden eyes. "And that," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "makes it all the more incredible. Do you have any idea how rare that kind of honor is?" "Honor?" The word tasted like ash in his mouth. "Is that what you call it? I disobeyed orders, got myself blacklisted, and spent the last 7 years hauling freight on the dangerous borders because no one else would hire me. Some honor." Her hand reached out and gently touched his face. Kale froze. "You saved a life," she insisted. "You chose compassion over protocol. If that's not honor, then the word has no meaning." For a moment they just stood there, the queen and the exile, connected by a choice made 7 years ago. Finally, reality set in. "Your court," Kale said, gently pulling away. "They're waiting." The queen nodded, her regal composure returning. She offered him a future he never dreamed of, a chance to lead joint rescue missions. "To save lives," she said, "instead of just hauling cargo through the dark." "What about the spying charges?" he asked. The queen waved a hand dismissively. "They will vanish like smoke. We'll say it was all a misunderstanding while you were scouting for rescue stations, a story I will personally confirm." She tilted her head. "Unless you'd rather go back to the borders?" "No," Kale said, faster than he intended. What you're offering, it's more than I deserve. It's exactly what you deserve, she replied. As Kale was escorted out, not as a prisoner this time, but as an honored guest, the queen faced her stunned court. The human, her advisor began, saved my life. The words cut through the whispers. Whatever charges were fabricated against him, that fact remains. A military commander stepped forward. Your Majesty, if this is true, why was it not known? The queen let out a bitter laugh. Because, Commander, admitting it would have meant acknowledging a human soldier showed more honor than our own forces that day. It would have complicated the official story of my miraculous survival that helped me secure the throne. The court went dead silent. The official version is a lie, she announced, her voice ringing through the hall. There was no divine providence. There was a man who shielded me with his own body while plasma mortars fell like rain. He was dying, his back filled with shrapnel. He could barely breathe. Her voice dropped, raw with the memory. When his rescue shuttle arrived, his only chance of survival, he made them see me first. He waved them down to rescue me before he finally let himself collapse. She looked at each member of her court. Humans saved me twice that day. First the soldier, and then his crew, who broke their own rules to save an enemy. A commander, bolder than the rest, stepped forward. Your Majesty, the evidence against him was... The queen cut him off, her tone like ice. The evidence was misinterpreted. Unless you're questioning my judgment, Commander? The man paled and stepped back immediately. Never, Your Majesty. This wasn't just a pardon, it was a public vindication. The queen's gaze then found Kale one last time across the room before the great doors closed. She gave him the slightest nod, a look that promised patience, trust, and a new beginning. He was being led to the diplomatic wing, to a comfortable room, not a cold cell. He could hear the court buzzing with questions behind him, but all he could think about was the girl with golden eyes in a city of fire. 7 years ago, he'd made a choice that cost him everything. He chose mercy over orders, kindness over protocol. Now, that same choice was giving him a second chance at the life he'd lost. It just goes to show that true honor is timeless, and one good deed can echo through the universe and change the fate of an entire empire. Her jade-green eyes flashed with a calculated gleam as she moved toward the throne. After all, Your Majesty, she purred. What better sign of peace could there be than a queen who sits on her throne because of a human's kindness? Thaxis shot her a glare. You're out of line, Lady Silene. Her Majesty owes her crown to her own power and the loyalty of her people. Does she? Silene's smile was as sharp as a dagger. Or does she owe it to one impossible choice when an enemy pulled her from the wreckage? Tell me, Commander, does that make her debt bigger or smaller? Does it make her stronger or weaker? Enough. Soraya's voice sliced through the tension. Lady Silene, while crude, does make an interesting point. Yes, I owe my life to a human soldier. And yes, that makes our current politics complicated. But think about what that says about us, about our empire. If we can't even acknowledge a debt like that, are we so proud that we refuse to admit when an enemy shows us mercy? She walked up the steps to the throne, but stopped short of sitting, resting a hand on its arm. More importantly, are we so blind that we'd throw away an opportunity like this? This man, Kale Thorne, is something we've never seen before. He's a bridge between our people, not built in some stuffy treaty room, but forged in the fire of war's darkest moment. What exactly are you suggesting, Majesty? Vakim asked, his tone betraying that he already knew the answer. I'm suggesting a joint rescue corps, humans and Clary, working side by side to save lives in the conflict zones. A wave of shock rippled through the court, and she smiled. Oh yes, I've been working on this for a while. All I was missing was the right person, the right symbol to make everyone swallow the idea. The military will never go for it, someone stated bluntly. Admiral Choros would sooner resign. Then let him resign. The casual dismissal of one of the Empire's top military leaders sent a fresh shockwave through the room. I am done with old men and their ancient wars. I'm tired of counting bodies while they count up territories. If Choros can't see the benefit in saving a life, no matter the species, then maybe it's time for a new generation of leaders. It's because of him, a courtier whispered, just loud enough for Soraya's enhanced hearing to catch. The human has her under a spell. Soraya let out a laugh, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Under a spell? Is that what you call it when someone shows gratitude? Is that your name for honoring a debt? She stared directly at the group where the whisper had come from. If that's the case, then yes, I am under a spell. A spell cast by the memory of someone who didn't see an enemy, but just a person who needed help. A spell cast by the hope that that kind of compassion can be found everywhere. Just waiting for a chance to grow. Your Majesty, Silene said, stepping forward again. Your vision is noble, but the practicalities must be dealt with. Soraya finally took her seat, her posture radiating a new sense of purpose. Vakim, I want you to discreetly contact Senator Chen's faction in the Earth Coalition. They've been pushing for humanitarian efforts. This could be the leverage they need to sideline the Warhawks. Chen's a realist, Vakim observed, his mind already churning through the political angles. She'll demand real benefits for Earth. Then give them to her. Share our medical technology. Give them access to our bioremediation techniques for their ruined planets. Do whatever it takes to get this done. She then turned to Thaxis. Commander, I want a complete audit of our detention protocols. How many other potential friends have we locked up on flimsy charges? How many chances have we lost to paranoia and prejudice? Majesty, our security protocols are there for a reason, he began. And I'm not saying we should get rid of them. I'm saying we should check if those reasons are still valid, or just convenient. She leaned forward. Start with Thorne's file. I want to know who ordered his arrest and the real reason why, not the official story. The commander's jaw tightened, but he gave a sharp bow. As you command. Now, Soraya said to the entire room, let's address the, as the humans say, elephant in the room. Yes, I had a strong reaction when I recognized Thorne. Yes, I broke protocol. And yes, this will feed the rumor mill. I could deny it or cook up some elaborate lie, but I'm not going to. She rose again, descending the steps to walk among her courtiers. 7 years ago, I was weak and scared, hiding while my family tore our empire apart. I survived the Battle of Arx Varos, not because I was strong, but because someone who had every reason to leave me for dead chose not to. That day changed me. It made me who I am. She stopped in front of a portrait of her uncle, the former emperor who had seized the throne through sheer brutality. The old emperor ruled with fear. I've tried to rule with logic, by carefully balancing all your competing desires. But today I remembered there's another path, to rule with truth, by acknowledging the debts we owe and the honor we find in others. Nice words, someone grumbled. Soraya instantly identified the voice as Duke Morven, a relic of the old regime who never fully supported her. But words don't protect our borders or keep the peace. No, they don't, she agreed, turning to face him. So tell me, Duke, what protects borders better? A forever war that bleeds us dry or a partnership that makes both sides stronger? What keeps the peace more effectively? Fear of the unknown, or the understanding that the person you call an enemy might be the one to save your life? Morvan's face turned a deep shade of crimson. But before he could sputter a reply, a chime echoed through the throne room. It wasn't an emergency alarm, but a signal for an urgent message. Report, Soraya commanded. A young officer rushed in from a side door, bowing low. Majesty, my apologies for the interruption. We just got a message from the diplomatic wing. It's about the human, Thorne. There's been an incident. A chill shot through Soraya's body. What kind of incident? He's fine, the officer quickly added, seeing the look on her face. But he got involved in something. A young Katoran serving girl had a medical emergency, an allergic reaction to something in the human food supplies. Thorne gave her emergency medical care. He saved her life. But, well, he had to break into the medical stores to do it. which is technically theft of royal property. The detention guards want to know if they should arrest him again. The silence in the room was absolute. Then Soraya started to laugh. Not a polite, royal chuckle, but a genuine, slightly wild laugh. "Arrest him?" she said between gasps of air. "For saving another life? For choosing compassion over rules yet again?" She scanned the baffled faces of her court. "Don't you see? Don't any of you see? This is just who he is. He does the right thing not because someone is watching or for a reward, but simply because someone needs help." She turned back to the officer. "You tell the detention staff that if they even look at Thorn the wrong way, they'll be guarding ice mines on the farthest moon. Then send my personal physician to check on the Kataran girl and on Thorn. I want full reports on both of them." "Yes, Majesty!" The officer practically ran from the room. "Well," Silene noted with a dry wit, "it seems your human is, at the very least, consistent." "My human," Soraya repeated, tasting the words. They felt strange, but not wrong. "I suppose he is. He's my savior, my debt, my opportunity." "And your problem," Vakim added gently. "Majesty, the factions who want war with Earth will use this. They'll claim you're compromised, that your feelings are clouding your judgment. And they would be right." The confession sent another shock through the court. "My judgment is shaped by my personal experience, by knowing that under all the uniforms and politics and species, there is a capacity for grace. If that makes me compromised, then so be it." She walked back toward the throne slowly, lost in thought. "You know what I remember most from that day? It wasn't the fear or the pain or the smoke. It was his eyes, right when the bombs started to fall. He knew he was going to die. He knew that staying with me instead of running meant he wouldn't make it out. And he stayed." Her fingers danced over the arm of the throne, pulling up holographic displays only she could see. "Computer, access historical archives. The Battle of Arx Varos, 7 years ago. Cross-reference with human military casualties." Data streamed across her vision. It didn't take long to find it. 17, she whispered. 17 human rescue workers died in that disaster. 17 people who weren't even soldiers, who were only there to save lives. Their own government disowned them, buried their records, and pretended they were never there. She swiped the display away and faced her court. "I have let that lie stand for 7 years. I let their sacrifice be forgotten because it was politically easier. Not anymore." "What are you going to do?" Vakim's voice was full of resignation, the sound of an advisor who knew his queen's mind was set. "A memorial, right here in the palace. It will honor everyone who died at Arx Varos, Clisari, and human." She couldn't help but smile at the look on Thaxis's face. "Yes, Commander. I know it's going to cause an uproar. I'm counting on it." "The separatists will riot," Morvan predicted with a grim look. "You'll have protesters filling the streets." "Good," Soraya shot back. "Let them protest out in the open where we can all see them, instead of scheming in the shadows." She sank back into her throne, feeling more sure of herself than she had in years. "Change doesn't happen when we're comfortable, Duke. It happens in moments of crisis, when we're forced to decide who we really want to be." A soft chime echoed through the grand hall, signaling a new message. This was the one. The Pala Sei announced in its usual flat tone. "Majesty, the human, Kale Thorn, requests permission to send a communication. He wants to thank you for the medical supplies and report that his companion is recovering well." "Of course he does," Queen Soraya whispered to herself. Then she spoke up, her voice ringing with authority. "Grant him permission, and ask if he'll join me for dinner in my private chambers." If a robot could be shocked, this would have been the moment. "Confirmed, Majesty," it replied, without a hint of surprise. But the court went into a silent frenzy. They were too disciplined to shout, but you could feel the wave of shock, The subtle shifts in posture, the wide-eyed glances, the hands discreetly tapping on communicators. You see, the Queen never, ever dined privately with anyone outside her most trusted circle. And she definitely didn't break bread with former prisoners, no matter their backstory. Majesty, her top advisor Vakim started to protest. I know, she cut him off, but her voice was gentle. I know all the reasons this is a bad idea. I know every rule I'm breaking and every precedent I'm shattering, but you have to understand, I have a debt to repay, not just to him but to what he stands for, the idea that we can find common ground, even with our enemies. She rose from her throne, and in that moment she wasn't just a young ruler, she was every bit the powerful queen. Court is dismissed. We'll meet again tomorrow to discuss the joint rescue mission. Vakim, I want preliminary proposals on my desk. Celine, she continued, you'll lead a committee on public relations. Figure out how to sell this to our people. Faxus, your security review starts now. They all bowed, knowing a final command when they heard one, but as they were turning to leave, Soraya's voice stopped them. One more thing. What just happened here? My acknowledging Thorn, my decision. It's going to cause a lot of talk. Some of you will see it as weakness. Others might see it as an opportunity. She let that sink in. But let me be clear. I'm not the scared little girl he saved 7 years ago. I am your queen. And I've learned how to turn even personal debts into political power. Just watch me. The throne room slowly emptied, leaving Soraya alone with her thoughts and the massive weight of the choice she had just made. Well, not completely alone. You're never truly alone in the palace. Guards were tucked away in hidden corners, and sensors were recording her every breath. But she was alone enough to finally let the royal mask fall. She pictured Cale Thorne in the diplomatic wing, probably pacing his room like a caged animal. Did he have any idea what she'd just done? Did he realize she had just gambled her entire political future on the strength of an old debt and a brand new hope? Her fingers drifted to her throat, where a tiny scar lay hidden beneath her royal jewels. It was a constant reminder of the day they met. She had deliberately kept it, refusing the fancy treatments that could have wiped it away. Her advisors never got it. How could she explain that some marks are meant to be kept, that some debts are carved right into your bones? A memory flashed in her mind. His hands, surprisingly gentle for a soldier's, applying emergency medical gel to the gash on her side. Their translator was busted, so they could only communicate with hand signals and expressions. But she had seen the genuine concern in his eyes, the careful way he treated her wound to avoid causing more pain. The hands of an enemy had shown her more kindness than some of her own family ever had. Computer, she said softly, show me everything you have on Cale Marcus Thorne. And I mean everything, including the sealed files. Access to sealed military records requires an authorization code, the AI replied. She smirked. Authorization, Soraya Prime, Queen Regnant. Override code, Arx Varos Dawn. A stream of data filled the air in front of her, painting a picture of a good man whose life was derailed because he had a conscience. Before the incident at Arx Varos, he had dozens of commendations. He was on the fast track to a top command position. And then, nothing. Just discharge papers that vaguely mentioned insubordination. No details, no real explanation. His life had been scrubbed clean by bureaucracy, but if you knew where to look, you could find the breadcrumbs. Work records from shipping companies on the outer fringes. Medical files for old injuries that lined up perfectly with the battle she remembered. He had been living on the margins, never once complaining or asking for a reward for his sacrifice. You foolish, noble man, she whispered at the floating data. Did you never once wonder what happened to the girl you saved? Did you never even try to look for me? But she knew why he hadn't. He thought she was dead. And even if he had a sliver of a doubt, what was a disgraced soldier going to do? Walk up to the palace gates and ask to speak with the queen? The same quiet honor that made him save an enemy's life would have stopped him from ever seeking a reward. Another chime. Majesty, Thorne has accepted your dinner invitation. He also sends a message. Soraya held her breath. Tell Her Majesty, I remember the song. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. The song. That half-forgotten tune she'd been humming when she was delirious with pain. It was an old lullaby her mother used to sing before she was taken from her. She had hummed it over and over again during those terrifying hours they waited for rescue, and somehow, after all these years, he remembered. Tell him, she began, taking a moment to compose herself. Tell him I still sing it sometimes. The AI confirmed the message was sent, and Soraya finally walked away from the empty throne. She had things to do, a dinner to plan. This wouldn't be a stuffy state dinner full of political games. It would be something different. It would be her one chance to finally have the conversation that 7 long years had stolen from her. As she glided through the palace hallways, with courtiers and servants bowing at her every step, she couldn't help but wonder what he would think of her now. He wouldn't see the terrified girl in the rubble. He would see the queen she had become. Sometimes cold, always calculating, forged by the very political machine that had almost ended her life. Would he respect the woman she was now? Would he see that she was trying to honor the gift of life he had given her? Or would he just see another royal, playing games with people's lives? The queen in her didn't do doubt. She never second-guessed herself. But the woman inside, the girl who was saved by an enemy, was both terrified and thrilled. Tonight, she would finally start to repay a 7-year-old debt. And maybe, just maybe, she'd find that the bridge between their two worlds could start with something as simple as a shared meal and a song that nobody else remembered. The throne room was empty now, but the very air seemed to hum with the energy of what had just happened. If the palace walls could talk, they would tell the story of the day a queen rose from her throne, not to command, but to acknowledge a debt. The day something deeply personal became powerfully political, and a simple act of honor became the blueprint for a new hope. And somewhere in the diplomatic wing, a man who had arrived in chains was beginning to realize that sometimes, when chains are broken, they don't reveal a prisoner, but a world of possibility. The private dining room was in a part of the palace most people never saw. It wasn't like the huge halls that screamed power and wealth. This room whispered. Soft light glowed from living walls that curved around the space like a warm hug, creating a cozy vibe that felt more like a secret hideaway than a royal chamber. Kale stood at the entrance, feeling completely and totally out of place. The palace staff had given him clean clothes, a simple but sharp-looking tunic and pants that probably cost more than he'd earned in the past year, but he still felt like a delivery guy who'd crashed a fancy party. His guards had just pointed him toward the door and mumbled that the queen would be there soon. The room was a mix of elegant and natural. The furniture looked like it grew right out of the floor, made of some polished wood that was warm to the touch, almost like it was alive. In the center was a table set for 2, covered in dishes he didn't even recognize. The smells were amazing and weird all at the same time. He found himself drawn to the massive window that took up one whole wall. It looked out over the capital city below, a breathtaking view of crystal towers reaching for 3 moons in a purple sky. Streams of light, which he guessed were transport ships, flowed between the buildings like glowing rivers. It was stunningly beautiful, and it made him feel 1,000,000 miles from home. It took me years to think it was beautiful, a voice said from behind him. Kale spun around to see Soraya standing in the doorway, and for a second, he was speechless. She wasn't wearing the heavy royal robes or the fancy jewels anymore. Instead, she had on a simple, deep blue dress that brought out the color of her skin. Her silver hair was in a loose braid that hung over her shoulder. She looked younger this way, more like the girl he remembered, and less like the powerful queen who had stared down her entire court just a few hours ago. "Your Majesty," he started, not sure if he should bow or kneel or just stand there like a lump. "Soraya," she corrected him gently as she walked into the room. "Please. In here, I'm just Soraya, And you're just Kale. No titles, no rules. Can we agree to that? He hesitated for a second, then gave a small nod. Yeah, it might take me a minute to get used to it, though. She smiled, a real smile that completely changed her face. You know, she said, when I first saw pictures of cities on Earth, I thought they were so ugly. All that gray metal and concrete. It's so different from our living buildings. But then I started to see the beauty in how they fight back, how they stand up to gravity with just engineering, not biology. There's something really amazing about that. Most people from my world just think they're dirty and crowded, Kale said, starting to relax a little now that they were on neutral ground. She walked over to the table and gestured for him to sit. That's because most people, she said, don't look close enough. Getting framed for espionage and sentenced to death by an alien queen was definitely not how I planned to spend my Tuesday. And just when I thought things couldn't get any weirder, she pardoned me in front of her entire royal court and invited me to dinner. So here I am, sitting across from the most powerful woman in this sector, trying to figure out if this is all some elaborate pre-execution prank. You won't believe why she really saved me, so stick around for the craziest story you've ever heard. She gestured to the chair, which molded itself to my body the second I sat down. You must be hungry, she said, her voice like liquid silver. I doubt the detention center's food was very appetizing. I've had worse, I mumbled. Military rations aren't exactly five-star dining. No, I imagine not, she replied, a faint smile on her lips. I should warn you, though, some of our dishes might be an acquired taste. I tried to include some human-safe options, but my knowledge was limited to what I could find in a few hours of research. The casual way she said it floored me. You researched human food? For me? A hint of a deeper blue color rose on her cheeks. I wanted to make sure you were comfortable. It seemed like the least I could do after having you arrested and nearly executed. Yeah, about that, I started, but she held up a perfectly manicured hand. We'll get to the serious topics soon enough. For now, could we just eat? I've imagined this conversation for 7 years, and I'd like to enjoy it for a moment before reality crashes the party. I just nodded. 7 years? What was she talking about? I had never seen this woman before in my life. She lifted a silver dome from a platter, releasing a cloud of steam that smelled incredible. This is a traditional dish from my mother's home province. The meat is from a creature a bit like your rabbits, she explained. If your rabbits were the size of grizzly bears and had 6 legs. Sounds delicious, I said, trying to keep a straight face. But when I took a bite, the flavor was amazing, delicate, and savory. And this, she said, revealing another dish, is completely synthetic, but it's supposed to mimic your earth chicken. We ate in a strange, comfortable silence for a few minutes. It was totally surreal, having dinner with alien royalty in a palace, but her calm demeanor made it feel almost normal. Like catching up with an old friend, except for the whole me being on death row an hour ago thing. So, she said finally, leaning back with a glass of glowing pink liquid. Tell me what happened. After Arisvaro. The name hit me like a physical blow. Arisvaro. The planet where my life fell apart 7 years ago. My appetite vanished. You know the official story, I said quietly. Insubordination. Violating a direct order. I know the official version, she corrected gently. I want to hear the real one. I took a deep breath, letting memories I'd buried for years bubble to the surface. I woke up in a military hospital 3 weeks after the mission. My back was held together with synth mesh and staples. The first thing they told me wasn't about my recovery. It was that I was under investigation. They said I risked the entire operation, risked human lives, my own and the rescue team's, all for an enemy combatant. My voice was flat, detached. They were very careful not to mention you by name. The whole report was so classified it barely existed. To the rest of the galaxy, it just looked like I abandoned my post. But what about your team? she asked, her golden eyes fixed on me. The crew on the shuttle that picked us up. They knew the truth. Dead, I said, the word tasting like ash. Their shuttle was shot down on the way to the extraction zone. No survivors. The only people who knew what really happened down in that temple were you and me, I continued, and I was in no shape to argue with the top brass. Her hand twitched on the table, as if she wanted to reach out. I'm so sorry, Cale. I never knew about the shuttle crew. Neither did I, until my court-martial. They made it real clear. Take the dishonorable discharge and keep my mouth shut, or they'd make sure I was blacklisted from every job in human space. What choice did I have? It was my word against theirs, and my only witness was an alien girl on an enemy planet, presumed dead. I finally took a sip of the alien drink. It burned in a good way. They gave me 48 hours to pack up my life. 4 years of service, gone in 2 days. What did you do then? She asked softly. I drifted, tried to get work with civilian rescue teams, but that discharge was like a ghost that followed me everywhere. The official record was sealed, but people talk. Nobody wants to hire a soldier who can't follow orders. I leaned back in the chair, the past washing over me. I ended up hauling freight on the border routes, small outfits that didn't ask a lot of questions. I spent a couple of years on a ship running medical supplies. The captain was a good woman, didn't care about my past. Then she had a heart attack during a rough run through an asteroid field. Her son took over and decided he didn't want a disgraced soldier on his crew. After that, it was just more of the same. Ship to ship, job to job, never putting down roots. I told myself I was free. No ties, no one to answer to. I let out a bitter laugh. The truth is, I was just running, hiding from the past, from ever letting anything matter again. Her eyes never left my face. Did you ever think about looking for me? Every single day, I admitted, the raw honesty of it surprising even me. But I thought you were dead. The entire sector was glassed. Even if I thought you'd survived, what could I do? I was a nobody, a disgraced grunt. You don't just knock on the door of a royal palace and ask if they've seen the girl you once saved from a fire. I looked for you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. As soon as I had the power, I started searching. But your military sanitized everything. All the records said was that an unnamed human soldier saved me. No name, no rank, no unit, nothing. It's probably for the best, I said. If your people found out I was alive and you were looking for me. My own command would have had you eliminated to cover their tracks, she finished, her tone laced with ice. Yes, I figured that out eventually, so I stopped the official search. But I never, ever stopped hoping. And instead, I said, a grim smile touching my lips, your patrol ships arrest me for espionage. Tell me about that, she urged. I want the real story, not the fiction in the arrest report. It was a stupid mistake, I confessed. I was hauling medical supplies. Legitimate cargo. My nav system glitched and I dropped out of hyperspace in the wrong system. Your system. By the time I realized where I was, your patrols were on top of me. I tried to explain, but navigation error sounds exactly like a spy's excuse, right? I had standard scanning equipment for charting asteroid fields. To them, it looked like spy gear. They saw my military background, and that was it. Case closed. She quietly refilled my glass. And then today, I said, meeting her gaze. I walked into that throne room fully expecting to die. I figured it would be a quick trial, an even quicker execution, and my death would be a minor diplomatic incident that would be forgotten in a week. Instead, you stood up for me. She smiled. A real, genuine smile this time. You should have seen the look on my general's face. I don't think he's been surprised in 100 years. Why did you do it? I had to ask. You could have just had me released quietly, without all the drama. She looked down at her glass, swirling the glowing liquid. Because for 5 years, I have been the queen they needed me to be. Cautious, strategic, always thinking 10 steps ahead. But when I saw you standing there, when I heard your voice, I wasn't the queen anymore. I was just the girl in the burning temple, hearing the one voice in the universe that meant I was safe. That must have made things complicated, I said. Oh, enormously, she laughed. Half my court thinks I'm insane. The other half is already plotting how to use this against me. My military advisors are convinced you're a deep cover agent who's compromised me, and the separatist factions are probably writing angry speeches as we speak. I'm sorry, I said reflexively. Don't be, she snapped, her voice sharp. Don't you dare apologize for saving my life, or for me finally acknowledging it. I have played their political games for 7 long years. Today, for the first time, I did something not because it was smart, but because it was right. She stood and walked to the massive window, the city lights dancing across her face. Do you know the worst part of being a ruler? It's not the hard decisions or the constant threats. It's the weight of it all. But today you reminded me that one person, doing one good thing, can change everything. Imagine being a soldier, and one decision, one single act of kindness, gets you kicked out of the army and turns you into a ghost. Now imagine being a princess, 16th in line for the throne, and the only reason you survive a massacre is because that same disgraced soldier pulls you from the rubble. This is the story of Kale and Soraya, and how one moment of impossible choice echoed across 7 years to change the fate of an entire empire. You're going to want to hear how this ends, so stick with me. Soraya stood at the window, the weight of her crown almost visible. It's the isolation, she said. Knowing every word, every gesture, is filtered through politics. Kale joined her, keeping a careful distance. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. She glanced at him. Your Shakespeare understood power. I've read your human literature. Know your enemy. Except the more I read, the less I could believe we were enemies. Your poets write of the same loves, the same losses. She trailed off. Tell me about becoming queen, Kale said softly. The girl I pulled from that wreckage was 16th in line. That's a lot of steps to climb, or a lot of bodies to fall. Her voice turned to ice. The bombing at Arx Varos wasn't random, Kale. My own uncle, Kalos, tried to eliminate all his rivals in one brutal strike. He nearly succeeded. 14 members of the royal family died that day. I only survived because my protectors had hidden me so well that his agents almost missed me. But he did find you, Kale stated, the memory of fire and smoke still fresh after all this time, and sent his bombers to finish the job. She touched the window. What he didn't count on was a human soldier with more honor than sense. Or that the story of the miracle survivor would rally the loyalist factions. Within days of you saving me, 3 different royal houses had declared for me. Not because they wanted a traumatized teenager on the throne, she continued, but because I was useful, a symbol of survival against my uncle's brutality. Politics, Kale said, understanding all too well. Always politics. They kept me hidden for 2 more years while the war raged. Tutors, advisors, weapons masters, all of them preparing me for a throne I never wanted, teaching me to be what they needed, cold enough to make the hard choices, clever enough to outmaneuver opponents, strong enough to hold power. She turned from the window to study him. Did they succeed? What do you think? Am I what they made me? Kale really looked at her, past the queen to the person underneath. I think you're someone who remembers being powerless. Who knows what it's like to be trapped and afraid. That changes a person, but it doesn't have to define them. Spoken like someone who understands, she said, moving back toward the table. When did you know you'd lost yourself? After the discharge? Before? The answer came without thought. The moment I decided to carry you to that temple instead of heading for extraction, I knew I was choosing to be someone my training said I shouldn't be. The discharge just made it official. Do you regret it? She asked softly. Do you regret becoming queen? He countered. Sometimes, she admitted. When I have to send soldiers to die for strategic advantages, when I sign treaties that benefit the empire but hurt individuals, When I look in the mirror and see my uncle's calculation looking back." She paused. "But then I remember the alternative. If I hadn't survived, Callus would have won. And he was a monster who would have turned the Empire into an engine of conquest." "So you became queen to prevent worse?" "I became queen because others needed me to. I remain queen because I've learned to be good at it." "Which brings us to the present," she said, settling back at the table. "And your future." A familiar weariness crept back into Cale. "The Joint Rescue Corps idea. You don't approve." "I think it's ambitious, possibly naive, and probably necessary," she replied, meeting his eyes. "I also think you're setting me up as a symbol for something larger than either of us can control." "Perceptive." The calculating queen was fully present now. "Yes, you'll be a symbol. The human who saved the Clary Queen, now working to save others. A living reminder that cooperation is possible. Is that such a terrible thing to represent?" "It is if it gets people killed. Your hardliners won't accept this easily. Neither will mine." Her smile was as sharp as a blade. "No, they won't. Which is why we'll need to be clever. Start small. Build successes. Make it politically costly to oppose. I've spent years learning to manipulate the game. Now I'll use those skills for something worthwhile." "And if I refuse?" he asked. "If I just want to go back to running freight on the borders?" She studied him for a long moment. "Then I'll arrange safe passage to human space and ensure your record is quietly corrected. You'll be free to disappear again, if that's what you truly want." She paused. "But I don't think it is. I think you've been running from purpose for 7 years, she said, and you're tired of it." Cale couldn't deny it. "You're asking me to trust that your vision won't get us both killed. I'm asking you to take another leap of faith, like the one you took in a burning temple 7 years ago." She reached across the table, and her hand found his. The touch was electric, alien skin against human, but somehow right. "I'm asking you to believe that what we started that day doesn't have to end in tragedy." Her hand was cooler than his, its texture subtly different. Cale found himself turning it over, tracing the faint lines on her palm that might have been natural, or might have been scars from that long-ago day. "I need time to think," he said finally. "Of course. You'll have quarters here in the palace. Comfortable ones. Not a cell. Take as long as you need." She squeezed his hand gently before withdrawing. "But know this, whatever you decide, I'm glad I found you. Glad I could finally say thank you, properly. You don't owe me thanks. I owe you everything," she insisted. The words were simple and honest, but more than that, I've carried you with me all these years. The memory of what you did, who you were in that moment, it shaped who I tried to become. When the politics got too thick, I'd remember the soldier who chose compassion over protocol. "Don't make me into something I'm not," Cale warned. "I'm just a man who made a choice. Not a hero, not a symbol, just someone who couldn't walk away." "And that," she said softly, "is exactly what makes you heroic. In a universe full of people who can always find reasons to walk away, you couldn't. Do you know how rare that is?" They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years and possibilities hanging between them. Outside, the city lights continued their dance, oblivious to the two people trying to navigate the treacherous ground between past and future. "There's something else," Soraya said eventually. "Something you should know before you decide. The Separatists aren't the only threat. There are elements within my own government who see my interest in human cooperation as weakness. They whisper that I'm too young, too idealistic." She met his eyes steadily. "If you stay, if you take this position, you'll be walking into a viper's nest of politics and danger. You'll be a target for anyone who wants to undermine me. You're trying to talk me out of it." "I'm trying to be honest. The girl you saved was hidden and protected. The queen you'd be serving is visible and vulnerable. I can offer you purpose, but I can't guarantee safety." Cale thought of 7 years of drifting, of meaningless jobs and empty nights. "Safety's overrated," he said finally. "I've been safe for 7 years. It hasn't been much of a life. Hope flickered in her golden eyes. Is that a yes? It's a maybe edging toward, probably, he managed to smile. Give me tonight to think, to process all of this. In the morning, we can discuss details. Fair enough? She rose, and he automatically stood as well. As she moved toward the door, Cale found himself speaking. Soraya. She turned, an eyebrow raised at his use of her name without a title. The song, he said. The one you hummed in the temple. Do you still remember it? Her expression softened. Every note. Could you sing it? I've wondered all these years what it really sounded like. She was quiet for a moment, then began to hum. It was the same melody he remembered, but richer now, more complex. Then words joined the melody in her own language, but somehow universal in their mourning beauty. A lullaby, he realized, a mother's song to a frightened child, promising that darkness was temporary, that dawn would come. When she finished, Cale found his throat tight with unexpected emotion. Thank you, she replied, for remembering. She left then, leaving Cale alone with the weight of his decision. He moved back to the window, looking out at the alien city that might become his home. 7 years ago, he'd made a choice that cost him everything. Now he was being offered a chance to make that loss mean something, to transform a moment of compassion into a bridge between worlds. The smart play was to run, to take her offer of safe passage and disappear. But Cale had never been particularly smart when it came to self-preservation. As the 3 moons traced their paths across the foreign sky, he stood at the window and thought about choices, consequences, and how sometimes the most dangerous path is the only one that truly leads you home. How does a queen get overthrown? It doesn't start with armies, but with whispers in a secret meeting just before dawn. They thought she didn't know they were plotting against her, all because she put her trust in one man, an outsider, an old enemy. They saw him as a threat, but she saw him as a second chance, not just for him, but for everyone. Tonight, as the city lights twinkled below, she was probably staring out her own window, while the man who saved her life, Kyle, was staring out his, both wondering what tomorrow would bring. They found each other against all odds, but the real story is just beginning. Want to see how a queen takes on the vipers in her own court? Stick with me. Lord Voxham, old as stone and just as hard, stood at the head of the crystal table. He hadn't slept, and it was his job to manage the chaos from yesterday's shocking events. Things are moving faster than we thought, he said, his voice flat. Duke Morven's people sent a formal protest at midnight, basically calling the queen unfit to rule. The military wants an emergency meeting, and some senator is already trying to get a vote of no confidence. Commander Thaxis, a man whose hands were as scarred as his reputation, leaned in. What did she expect? She dismissed the entire court just to have a private chat with a human prisoner. Former prisoner, a smooth voice cut in. It was Lady Silene. And now, he's apparently the architect of Her Majesty's new peace plan. We need to start using the right words. Words won't matter if the old guard gets their way, Vakim snapped. The whispers have already started, that the human is messing with her mind, that he used some kind of forbidden tech on her all those years ago. That's absurd, Silene scoffed. Human mind control tech is a joke compared to ours. Logic doesn't stop a good conspiracy theory, Thaxis grumbled. What people see is our queen standing up from her throne, for a human she hasn't seen in 7 years. They see that she had dinner with him, alone, he went on. And now she's about to give him a massive amount of power over a project that could change everything. Vakim flicked a switch, and the walls shimmered as the room became soundproof. It gets worse. Intel is picking up strange chatter from the 7th Fleet. Admiral Choros pulled 3 squadrons back from the border, claiming it's for maintenance. Choros wouldn't dare, Silene said, but she didn't sound so sure. Wouldn't he? Thaxis shot back. His nephew died in that war. He's never forgiven the queen for making it out alive when his own family didn't. If he thinks a human has her under his thumb, he'll see it as his duty to act. We have to do something before this explodes. The real question, Voxim said gravely, is how we protect the Queen from herself. Or maybe, a new voice echoed from the shadows, you should be asking if her choices need your protection at all. Every head in the room whipped around. Queen Soraya stepped out of a hidden doorway, dressed in simple workout clothes that made her look more like a warrior than a ruler. And right behind her, almost hidden in the doorway, was Kyle Thorne. Your Majesty, Vakim stammered, bowing so fast he nearly fell over. We weren't expecting you. Of course you weren't, she said, gliding into the room. Secret meetings to question my sanity don't usually include me on the guest list. Kyle followed a few steps behind her, trying to look like he belonged there. Please, she said, a dangerous smile playing on her lips. Don't stop on my account. I'm dying to hear how you plan to protect me from myself. Majesty, Thaxis said, choosing his words carefully. Our only concern is for the stability of the Empire. What happened yesterday? It's given your enemies an opening. What happened yesterday, Soraya said, sinking into a chair as if she owned the world, is that a truth we've been ignoring for years finally came out. My enemies will always look for an opening. The real question is whether my so-called allies will stand with me, or if you'll let fear make you do something stupid. She motioned for Kyle to sit at the table. He hesitated, then did, his discomfort obvious to everyone. Mr. Thorne and I were just going over the plans for our joint rescue project, she announced. I figured he should probably see the kind of politics he's walking into. With all due respect, Majesty, Voxim said, looking at Kyle like he was something unpleasant on his shoe. Is it really wise to have an outsider in this meeting? Soraya's eyes turned to ice. Kyle Thorne saved my life, and it cost him everything. He's earned my trust more than anyone standing in this room ever has. But if it makes you feel better, she added, her voice dripping with sarcasm, think of this as a test. Let him see you all at your worst. If he still wants to help us after this pathetic display, then maybe he's exactly the man we need. Celine leaned back, a calculating look in her eyes. All right, let's stop dancing around it. Duke Morven has the votes to force you out if he wants to. Admiral Choros's fleet is acting squirrely, which means the military might be on the hardliners' side. Protests are popping up in 3 major cities, and it's all because you publicly admitted you owe a debt to a human soldier. No, Soraya corrected her, her voice sharp. It's because decades of fear and prejudice are looking for an excuse to boil over. If it wasn't this, it would be something else. At least this way the battle lines are clear. Are they? Thaxis challenged. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just handed your enemies the perfect weapon, a human with power. Especially after that private dinner, which is already the subject of a dozen disgusting rumors. Kyle shifted in his seat, ready to defend her. But Soraya put a hand on his arm, stopping him. Let them finish, she murmured. You need to hear all of it. The military will never accept him, Thaxis pressed on. It's bad enough we're dealing with humans at all. But this one, his classified file is... classified, Soraya interrupted smoothly. Which makes me wonder how you got your hands on it, Commander. Thaxis actually looked embarrassed for a second. I have contacts. When you gave him the job last night, I made some calls. I found a soldier who disobeyed direct orders, abandoned his post in the middle of a battle, was dishonorably discharged, and has spent the last 7 years drifting through the armpit of the galaxy. That's not exactly the resume of a man we should be trusting with our future, he finished. You left out the part where he saved my life, Soraya said, her voice dangerously calm. Or was that not in your secret report? There's no proof of that. I am the proof, she said, rising to her feet. And in that moment, even in her simple clothes, she was every inch a queen. I was there. I remember the smoke, the explosions, the feeling that I was about to die. And then this man, this enemy soldier who had every reason to let me die, chose to show me mercy instead. She turned to Kyle. "Show them." He looked confused. "Show them what?" "Your back," she said softly. "The scars. Show them what mercy costs." Kyle hesitated, then slowly stood up, turned around, and lifted the back of his shirt. A collective gasp went through the room. His back was a nightmare landscape of violence. Thick surgical scars crisscrossed over melted-looking burn tissue. The starburst patterns of shrapnel wounds were everywhere, connected by the long, thin lines where surgeons had tried to stitch him back together. "Plasma mortars," Thaxis breathed, his soldier's eye taking over. "Direct hit. He shouldn't even be alive." "He almost wasn't," Soraya said quietly. "He used his own body to shield me while the world burned down. Every single scar you see is a choice he made. A moment he could have saved himself, but saved me instead." Kyle pulled his shirt down, his face tight with embarrassment, and sat down. "That changes the military read on the situation," Thaxis admitted, "but it doesn't change the politics." "Your enemies won't care about his scars," he insisted. "All they'll see is a human you've put in charge." "Then we'll just have to be smarter than they are," Silene said, shocking everyone. "The story is powerful, a queen who pays her debts, a soldier who chose compassion over hate. If we spin it right, we can turn this whole thing around." "You're actually going along with this madness?" Vakim sputtered. "I'm going along with reality," Silene shot back. "The queen has made her move. We can either help her win, or we can stand by and watch her lose. I know which choice is better for the Empire." "And if Admiral Choros makes a move?" Thaxis asked. "Then he shows the world he's a traitor." Soraya's voice was now pure steel. "And we will crush him. I'm done playing games and tiptoeing around threats," she declared, pacing the room like a caged tiger. "For 5 years, I have balanced and compromised and played nice. And where has it gotten us? Nowhere. We're stuck in a cold war that's bleeding us dry. It's time for a change." "Your way could lead to a civil war," Thaxis warned. "My way leads to a future," she countered. "And that's what terrifies them more than anything." Just then, a soft chime echoed through the silent room, signaling that someone was at the door. Imagine being told you're a contamination. That's the word Duke Morven was using, and it echoed in Vasim's concerned voice as he read the message. The Duke was calling a meeting to discuss the human contamination of the royal court. That contamination was me. From the corner, I finally spoke up. "Contamination," I repeated, letting the ugly word hang in the air. Funny choice of words. Everyone turned to me. Thaxis, the security chief, asked what I meant. "Just something I've noticed," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "Back on my world, when people start throwing around words like contamination, it's usually not about purity, it's about power. They're just trying to scare people into giving them more control. It never works out for anyone," I finished. And yet, one of the ministers, Voxim, pointed out, "Here you are. The very thing they're so afraid of." I couldn't help but give a small smile. "Here I am," I agreed. "Just a washed-up cargo pilot who made one decent decision 7 years ago. If a guy like me is all it takes to shake up their entire power structure, then maybe it's time their structure got shaken." A laugh cut through the tension. It was Silene, and she looked as surprised as anyone. "Ah," she said. "Now I get why the Queen likes you. You have a way of cutting right through the nonsense." Just then, Queen Soraya made it official. "Mr. Thorne has accepted the position," she announced. "He'll be the director of the new Joint Human Kasari Rescue Initiative. We're starting a small pilot program in the border zones, where our emergency crews are already working near each other. If it works there," she continued, "we'll have the political support to expand it." Thaxis, ever the worrier, cut in. "And what about security? He'll be a walking target for extremists from both sides." I spoke up before anyone else could. "I can handle myself." but Thaxis just shook his head. Against assassins? Poison? The kind of threats you'll face here? You need real protection. He'll have it, Soraya said, her voice leaving no room for argument. I'm assigning a detail from my personal guard. Vaksim's eyebrows shot up. Your personal guard? Your Majesty, that is highly irregular. These are irregular times, she replied, her gaze sweeping across the table, meeting the eyes of every minister. I need to know where each of you stands, not where you think you should stand for political reasons. I need to know where you really stand. Are you with me or are you against me? She asked. There's no in-between anymore. The silence was heavy as they all weighed their options. Finally, Celine stood up and gave a formal bow. I stand with my queen and the future she is building, no matter how tough the road gets. Thaxis followed, though he still looked worried. My oath is to the throne. I'll follow your lead, Your Majesty, but I'm still going to bring up my security concerns. Vasim let out a long sigh, the sound of a man who'd seen politics change like the seasons. I've served 3 rulers. You are easily the most difficult, but also the most promising. I'm with you, he concluded, even if I'm worried about where this is all going. It's going toward change, Soraya said simply. That's why they're so scared. She turned to me. Are you still sure you want this? You see the opposition building. It's only going to get worse from here. I thought about it for a second. I've been on the run for 7 years, I told her. I'm sick of running. If they want to fight, I'll give them one. Sounds like a soldier, Thaxis remarked. But this isn't war. It's politics. It's a whole lot dirtier. Then I've got a lot to learn, I said, standing up to address them all. Look, I don't know your fancy rules or traditions. I'm going to mess up. But what I do know is how to save lives. And I know how to make a team out of people who have every reason to hate each other. That's got to be worth something, right? I asked. We're about to find out, Vakim muttered. Duke Morvan's meeting tonight is going to be the start of it all. We need a plan. We need more than a plan, Soraya corrected him. We need to give them something else to talk about. A distraction. What kind of distraction? Silene asked, curious. Soraya smiled, a look so sharp it could have cut diamonds. I'm going to formally introduce Kyle to the entire court tonight, before Morvan even has his meeting. That's bold, Vakim said slowly. That's the whole idea, she shot back. Let them see him. Let them see us standing together. Force them to deal with the reality of the situation, not just some whispers and rumors. It could get violent, Thaxis warned. Then we'll be ready for it, she said, heading for a hidden exit. Get formal court attire for Mr. Thorne, something that shows off his human background but also his new rank, and beef up security around the palace, but do it quietly. Where are you going? Vakim called after her. To get ready for war, she said without turning back. A political war, but a war all the same. Mr. Thorne, with me. I followed her out of the room, leaving the ministers to figure things out. We walked down a narrow corridor lit by glowing strips on the walls. Well, she said once we were alone, that went better than I thought. Really? I asked. Because it looked to me like your entire government is about to crack in half. It's been cracking for years, she admitted. At least now everyone can see the fault lines. She took a left at a fork in the passage. Any second thoughts about your decision? Ask me again after tonight, I quipped. She let out a laugh that echoed in the tight space. Fair enough. I should probably warn you, though. Our formal court clothes are notoriously uncomfortable for humans. So many ceremonial layers. I've worn full combat armor in 40-degree heat, I told her. I think I can handle some fancy clothes. We came out onto a balcony that overlooked a training yard. Guards were running through drills below, their movements strange but incredibly precise and deadly. So tell me about this Admiral Choros, I said, changing the subject. He's a brilliant commander, completely ruthless, and he despises humans with a burning passion, she explained, leaning on the railing. His nephew was supposed to be his successor. The kid died on Arx Varos, trying to get families out during an attack. Choros blames humans for the bombing that killed him, refuses to believe it was an inside job. And now a human is the Queen's right-hand man, I finished for her. Worse, a human saved the very thing his nephew died trying to protect. He must be furious. She turned to look at me. He will try to kill you. Not right away. He's too smart for that. But he will try. I've dealt with worse. Have you really? She asked, her eyes searching mine. A firefight is simple. You see the threat, you deal with the threat. This is different, she warned. Politics is a battle where the rules change every 5 minutes, and you can't always see who's shooting at you. Then I'll need a good teacher, I said. You'll have one, she promised, standing up straight. Okay, new plan. We have 6 hours before the court session starts. That's just enough time for a crash course in alien politics and rules. Are you a fast learner? Part of the job in the military, I said. Hit me with it. For the next few hours, my head was swimming. Soraya walked me through the tangled web of the court, explaining the hidden meanings behind a simple nod or a bow, and pointing out the ancient rivalries between the powerful families. I soaked it all in like a soldier memorizing a mission briefing. When a tailor arrived with my formal outfit, I just looked at it and sighed. The basic design was like a human military dress uniform, but it was covered in alien flair, shimmering panels of fabric and crystal badges that showed off my new title. It could be worse, Soraya said as they fitted it on me. Duke Morven wanted you to wear a servant's uniform. What a guy, I muttered. He has his moments, she said. But after tonight, he's going to be an open enemy. She walked around me, adjusting a fold of cloth. Remember, you're not just you anymore. You represent the very idea that our two peoples can work together. Every little thing you do or say tonight will be picked apart. No pressure, huh? All the pressure, she corrected me with a slight smile. But you've handled worse. As the time drew near, I felt a strange sense of calm. This was just another mission. The weapons were words, not blasters, but the stakes were just as high. And this time, unlike 7 years ago, I knew exactly what was on the line. Ready? Soraya asked. She was now in her own formal gown, a stunning dress that looked like it was woven from captured starlight. About as ready as a cargo pilot can be for an alien royal ball, I said. You're not a cargo pilot anymore, she said, her voice firm. You're the director, the man who saved a queen. You're the bridge between our worlds. Now own it. I straightened up, my shoulders squaring instinctively. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget. We walked out of the room together, heading for the grand hall where the entire court was waiting. I could practically feel the tension in the air, different groups already taking their positions for the drama that was about to unfold. This was the next chapter of our crazy story, and it was about to challenge everything this empire thought it knew about humans, about themselves, and about the chance for peace in a galaxy full of suspicion. In the distance, a set of bells began to chime. They weren't an alarm, but an announcement that the court was about to begin. The sound echoed down the crystal halls like a prophecy, signaling that change was coming, whether the Empire was ready for it or not. As Soraya and I walked toward that sound, we were walking toward a future neither of us could have ever imagined. The little girl I pulled from a pile of rubble and the soldier who saved her, now about to try and save something so much bigger. The bells kept ringing, and in that sound was both a promise and a threat. It was the sound of an old world ending, and a new one struggling to be born. The Grand Court had seen 1,000 years of ceremonies, but it had never, ever seen anything like this. The crystal walls themselves seemed to vibrate with nervous energy as the nobles, dressed in a rainbow of flowing robes, filled the massive hall. Even in a perfectly tailored suit, Cale Thorne felt like a wolf in a room full of vipers. He was the only human here, and every single alien eye was on him. "Just breathe," Soraya whispered next to him, her voice a ghost in the hostile buzz of the crowd. "They want you to crack. Don't give them what they want." Cale locked his face into a mask of calm, but every instinct he'd honed in the military was screaming. This grand hall, with its towering pillars and shadowy corners, was a tactical nightmare. These aliens fought with whispers and insults, but Cale knew a well-placed word could be just as deadly as a blaster bolt. Across the room, Duke Morven stared, his pale blue skin turning a deep, angry purple. His cronies huddled around him, their eyes fixed on Cale, making it perfectly clear he wasn't welcome. Suddenly, a booming voice cut through the tension. "The Queen arrives!" Instantly, the entire assembly bowed as one. Soraya made her entrance not from behind the throne, but from the main doors at the far end of the hall. It was a power move. She forced every single person to watch her walk the entire length of the chamber. She moved like she owned the very air, her gown shimmering under the lights, making it seem like she was glowing from the inside out. She didn't look at Cale as she passed, keeping up the formal act, but she walked just close enough for him to catch the scent of her perfume, a strange but beautiful mix, like a thunderstorm and a field of wildflowers. The moment she sat on the throne, everyone rose. The silence that followed was so thick you could feel it. "Lords and ladies of the Empire," Soraya's voice rang out, clear and strong, reaching every corner without a microphone. "We are here tonight to witness a turning point in our history. For generations, our people have only known war. Tonight, we choose a new path." From somewhere in the crowd, a voice whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "A future of contamination." Soraya didn't even flinch. She continued as if nothing had happened. "Cale Thorne is not here as a conqueror or a beggar. He is here as a partner. 7 years ago, in the ashes of Arx Varos, he taught me that compassion isn't limited by species. He saved my life, asked for nothing, and lost everything he had in the process. And now, he has come to claim what he is owed." Just then, Duke Morven stepped forward, pretending it was a spontaneous decision. "How very convenient," he sneered, "that this human shows up right when your majesty is trying to build an alliance with Earth. How lucky that his story fits your political goals so perfectly." The crowd started murmuring, sensing a fight was about to break out. "Do you have something to say, Duke Morven?" Soraya's voice was dangerously calm. "I have questions, your majesty. Questions many of us share," he said, gesturing to his supporters. "This human says he saved you, but there were no witnesses. We have no proof, other than your word, which, of course, we would never question. But perhaps," he added, his voice dripping with fake concern, "the trauma of that day has clouded your memory." Cale felt his hands ball into fists. The insult was slick, suggesting the Queen was either a liar or crazy, all while sounding perfectly polite. "You want proof?" Soraya said, standing up and walking down from the throne. "Fine. Captain Thaxis, step forward." The captain of her royal guard stepped out, his face unreadable. "Tell the court what your investigators found in Mr. Thorne's medical files." Thaxis cleared his throat. "The scar tissue on his back is consistent with burns from Clary-issue plasma mortars. The pattern indicates he was using his own body to shield someone or something when he was hit. Our analysis dates the wounds to approximately 7 years ago." Morven shot back, "Medical records can be forged. Scars can be self-inflicted." "True," Soraya said, and a wave of shock went through the room, "which is why I brought something else." She touched a control on her throne, and massive holographic screens flickered to life all around the chamber. They showed grainy, chaotic surveillance footage from the Battle of Arx Varos. The city was in ruins, choked with smoke, but you could clearly see what was happening. A human soldier was carrying a young Clary girl through the rubble, stopping to check on her before throwing his body over hers as a massive explosion rocked the street. "The quality isn't great," Soraya admitted, "but our biometric scans confirm the identities. That young girl is me, and that soldier is Cale Thorne. Proof that courage and kindness can come from anywhere." The hall exploded with chatter. Some looked convinced, others still looked doubtful. Morven and his followers went into a frantic huddle. "A touching story," Morven finally shouted over the noise. "But even if it's true, it changes nothing. One good deed 7 years ago doesn't mean this human should be influencing imperial policy. It doesn't change the fact that our species are fundamentally incompatible." "Incompatible?" Cale's voice, sharp and clear, cut through the chaos for the first time. Everyone turned to him. "Is that what you call it when we bleed the same color? When we scream the same way in pain? When we reach for our loved ones as we die?" The hall fell dead silent. "I've pulled my own people from burning ships, and I've pulled your people from collapsed buildings. In that moment, when someone needs help, there is no difference. Pain is pain. Fear is fear." He looked right at Morven. "If you can't see that, then you're the one who's broken, not me." "How dare you!" one of Morven's supporters yelled. "I dare," Cale shot back, "because I've earned it, not by being born into the right family or by playing political games. I earned it by making a choice when the world was on fire and nobody was watching. What have you ever earned, besides the right to stand in this fancy room and judge who gets to live and who has to die?" "You see?" Morven yelled to the crowd. "The human shows his true colors. He's aggressive, disrespectful. Is this the kind of person we want advising our queen?" "He's honest," a new voice said. Lady Silene stepped forward. "He's direct, and he isn't impressed by old traditions that do nothing but keep us apart. Maybe that's exactly what we need." The assembly erupted, with different sides shouting at each other. Through it all, Soraya just watched, her eyes calculating. Then a new voice sliced through the noise, a voice that was cold, hard, and dripping with authority. "Enough!" Admiral Choros strode into the hall, flanked by his top officers. His uniform was covered in so many medals it looked like a museum exhibit, and every single one was for a victory won against humanity. His presence instantly changed the room from a political debate into something much more dangerous. "Admiral," Soraya said evenly, "I don't remember sending you an invitation." "Fleet Command doesn't need an invitation when the security of the Empire is at stake," he growled. He deliberately stood between Cale and the throne, a clear message to everyone. "I've just received a disturbing report from the border," the Admiral announced. 3 human warships have just crossed into disputed territory. They claim they're responding to our illegal detention of a human citizen." Every eye in the room swung to Cale. "I had nothing to do with that," he said immediately. "Of course not," Choros said, his voice full of poison. "And yet, here we are. Your very presence here is making our enemies bold. You being in this court is a threat." He turned to the assembly. "This is what happens when we entertain human sympathies. They see our kindness as weakness. They see an opportunity and they take it." 3 ships is hardly an invasion, Lady Silene pointed out. 3 ships today, 30 tomorrow, and 300 once they think we've gone soft, Choros shot back, his scarred face twisting with bitter memories. "I've fought humans for 40 years. I know how they operate. They poke, they prod, they look for any weakness. And what better spy could they ask for than someone who has the Queen's ear?" "Are you calling me a spy?" Cale asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I'm saying you're human," Choros replied. "And no matter what you feel personally, when the time comes, you'll always choose your own kind. It's not a choice. It's just nature." He turned back to the Queen. "Your Majesty, your gratitude is noble. But gratitude is a terrible reason to make policy, and an even more dangerous reason to trust someone." "And hatred?" Soraya asked quietly. "Is hatred a better foundation, Admiral? After 40 years of war, what have we accomplished? besides filling graveyards on both sides of the border? It has protected our people and our way of life from human greed." "Our way of life?" Kale laughed, a raw, bitter sound. "You mean the part where kids get burned alive in bombing runs? Where entire cities are turned to glass? Where good soldiers on both sides die for politicians who've never seen a day of combat? Better to die than to be diluted," someone from Morven's group shouted. A chill ran through the hall. Soraya stood up, slowly. There was something in the way she moved that made even Admiral Choros take a half-step back. "Dilution," she said, the word tasting like poison in her mouth. "Tell me, Lord Krath. Yes, I know it was you who spoke. What exactly are you so afraid of diluting? Our strength? Our culture? Or just your own imaginary purity?" The young lord she'd called out tried to shrink back into the crowd, but her gaze held him like a spear. "Step forward," she commanded. "If you're going to say it, at least have the courage to own it." Lord Karath shifted uncomfortably, his green-hued skin darkening a shade. "I only meant—" "You meant that contact with humans makes us lesser," Soraya cut him off. She descended from the throne's platform, moving through the stunned assembly with the grace of a predator. "Tell me, Karath, what do you actually know about human culture?" "Well, nothing, really." "Exactly. You know nothing. You're afraid of something you've never even tried to understand." She slowly turned, her gaze sweeping across the entire room. "How many of you have ever had a real conversation with a human? Read one of their books? Studied their history for reasons other than finding military weaknesses?" Her questions were met with a heavy, telling silence. "And yet here you all stand, so sure of their inferiority, so convinced of your own superiority. What is that based on? The color of their skin? The shape of their eyes? The planet they were born on?" "It's based on their actions," Admiral Koros shot back. "Their aggression. Their endless need to expand." "Our expansion," Kyle said, his voice quiet but firm. "Our aggression. Or have we forgotten that this whole war started because we laid claim to systems the humans had already settled? Propaganda and lies." "It's the truth," Soraya stated, silencing Koros. "An uncomfortable truth, buried deep in classified files. But it's the truth. We aren't the innocent victims in this conflict, Admiral. Neither side is, and that's precisely why we have to find a different path forward." "Through him," Morven sneered, gesturing dismissively at Kyle. "This broken soldier who couldn't even follow his own people's orders?" "Through anyone brave enough to try," Soraya countered. "And yes, we're starting with him, because Kale Thorne has already shown what's possible when we stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other as people." Just then, a commotion erupted at the main entrance, cutting off whatever Morven was about to say. Guards burst into the hall, their usual stoic dignity gone, replaced by frantic urgency. "Your Majesty," the lead guard panted, "there's a situation in the lower city. A human transport had to make an emergency landing. Its reactor failed. It's going critical. There's a radiation leak threatening the entire Vash quarter." "Evacuate the area now," Soraya commanded. "We're trying, but it's so densely populated. We don't have enough first responders," the guard explained. "The human crew is trying to contain it, but they need help. Our people, they won't go near the ship. They're afraid of the contamination." "Contamination?" Soraya repeated, her eyes locking onto Lord Krath. "What a convenient turn of events." "I'll go," Kyle said without a moment's hesitation. "Absolutely not," Thaxis interjected. "You are needed here. Send the emergency teams." "The same emergency teams that are too scared to approach a human ship?" Kyle was already heading for the door. "People are going to die while we stand here arguing about rules. I know how to handle a reactor meltdown." "It could be a setup," Koros warned. "A perfectly timed crisis to make the humans look like heroes." Kyle stopped at the doorway and looked back at the Admiral, his contempt clear. "Only someone who's never had to save a life could even think that." He turned to the Queen. "Your Majesty, with your permission?" Soraya gave a firm nod. "Take my personal guard." And any who will volunteer. I'll go. The voice shocked everyone. It was Captain Thaxis stepping forward. If this human is willing to risk his life for our people, my honor demands I do the same. And I, another guard declared, stepping forward. Then another. In seconds, a dozen Klasari soldiers had volunteered to follow a human into a death trap. Go, Soraya ordered. Save everyone you can. As Kyle and his new team raced from the hall, Soraya turned back to the assembly. This is what I'm talking about. This isn't about submitting to humanity or abandoning who we are. It's about the radical idea that when lives are on the line, we can actually work together. If that thought scares you more than a radiation meltdown in the Vash Quarter, then you seriously need to re-examine your priorities. Nice speech, Morven scoffed. But what happens when your pet human fails? When our people die because you trusted the enemy? Then that responsibility will be mine, Soraya replied coolly. Just like I'm responsible for every life this pointless war has already taken. The only difference is I'm trying to save lives instead of just avenging them. An excruciating silence filled the hall. The court stayed put, bound by an unspoken agreement. They all knew that whatever was happening in the Vash Quarter would define the future of their empire for generations. The updates trickled in. The team was at the ship. Radiation levels were critical. The evacuation was slow. Then nothing. Perhaps, Duke Morven began smugly, we should start discussing the line of succession. If the Queen's judgment has become so poor that she sends loyal guards to their deaths alongside humans. The main doors flew open. Kyle stood there, his formal clothes shredded and torn, with fresh radiation burns marking his skin. Behind him, Thaxis and the other guards were helping a mix of human and Klasari civilians, all weak from radiation exposure, but all alive. Medical teams, now! Kyle ordered, his voice carrying an authority that made everyone scramble before they remembered he held no rank here. Start radiation treatment protocols for everyone who was exposed. The reactor is contained, but these people need help immediately. As medics rushed forward, Kyle swayed, his energy spent. Soraya was at his side in an instant, catching him before he hit the floor. You reckless fool, she whispered. The burns will heal, he managed to say. The 300 people we got out of there might not have. It was worth it. Human and Klasari? She asked. Just people, he replied. Scared people who needed help. She helped him to a nearby bench as the medics started treating his burns. The entire assembly watched, stunned into silence, as the full reports came in. The human crew had sacrificed their own ship to prevent a citywide catastrophe, working side by side with Klasari responders to seal the leak. Miraculously, there were no deaths, though many faced a long road to recovery. You see? Admiral Choros's voice cut through the quiet. Human incompetence almost wiped out an entire city quarter. And you want to trust them? Human courage saved that quarter, Thaxis shot back, still holding a small Klasari child he'd carried out of the hot zone. Their crew could have jettisoned the core and saved themselves. Instead, they stayed to protect our city. And this man, he gestured to Kyle, he absorbed more radiation than anyone else, making sure every last one of us got out safely. It's one incident, Morven started to argue. It's one incident that proves what's possible, Soraya interrupted, her voice ringing with newfound strength. Humans and Klasari working together, saving lives together. This is the future I am fighting for. Not because I owe some debt to one man, but because I've seen what he represents. She stood tall, addressing them all with unwavering authority. Duke Morven, you wanted a vote of no confidence. Make your motion official, right now, or stand down. Morven glanced around the hall, trying to gauge his support. He found none. Many who had sided with him just an hour ago now looked away, clearly moved by what had just happened. Others, especially those with family in the Vash Quarter, glared at him with open hostility. I withdraw the motion, he mumbled. For now. Admiral Choros? The Admiral's face was like granite. The fleet remains loyal to the throne. But this changes nothing about the human threat. It changes everything, Soraya said softly. It shows us that the real threat isn't humanity. It's the fear and hatred that's been driving us apart. Today, humans and Klasari saved lives together. Tomorrow, we'll save more. And one day, maybe we'll finally remember that saving lives is more important than what species someone belongs to. As the medical teams bustled and the assembly began to break apart, Soraya went back to Kyle's side. His burns were already looking better, a testament to alien medical tech. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" she asked quietly. "Hopefully I saved some people and made your political life a little less of a nightmare." "You've given me leverage," she corrected him. "Public opinion is going to swing hard after this. The rescue initiative will get the support it never would have before." She paused. "Although I'd really prefer it if you could help our cause without nearly getting yourself killed in the process." "I'll try, but no promises," he said with a weak smile. "So what's next?" "Now?" She looked around the hall, at the nobles arguing in hushed tones, at the medics treating humans and Klasari without distinction, at Admiral Choros leaving with his top officers. "Now the real work begins. We might have won this battle, but the war for hearts and minds is just getting started." "Any regrets about pulling me into all this?" She thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. "My only regret is that it took me 7 years to find you again. Whatever happens next, at least we're facing it together." As the night wore on and the crisis faded, the court of the Klasari Empire began to slowly accept a new reality. The human was here to stay, not as a conqueror and not as a subject, but as a partner. Some would resist it, others would embrace it, but nobody could deny what they had seen with their own eyes. Change had come to the Empire, and it wore a human face scarred by compassion. There in the grand hall where tradition had ruled for 1,000 years, the first steps toward a different kind of future had just been taken. The revolution hadn't started with guns or starships. It had started with the simple act of looking at an enemy, seeing a person, and choosing to help them anyway. The neutral planet of Haven was a place that existed because neither the humans nor the Klasari actually wanted it. It had too few resources to be worth colonizing and was too unimportant to have any military value. So it had become a meeting point for people who chose trade over war. Its main city, Convergence, was a sprawling, chaotic mix of architectural styles that, against all odds, created a strange kind of harmony under the light of 3 pale suns. Kyle stood on a balcony at their temporary apartment, watching the diverse crowds moving through the streets below. It had been 6 months since the reactor crisis. For 6 months, they had been building an impossible dream out of sheer hope and grit. The Joint Rescue Initiative was finally real, but it had come at a price. "The morning's complaints have arrived," Sarah announced, stepping onto the balcony beside him. She'd long since swapped her royal gowns for practical civilian clothes, now wearing a simple blue tunic and pants that made her look less like a queen and more like the young woman he'd once pulled from the rubble. "Anything good?" he asked, his eyes still fixed on the horizon. "Duke Morven is demanding yet another audit of our finances. Admiral Choros lodged a formal complaint about our newest rescue station, and Senator Lauron from the Earth Coalition is asking why we aren't saving people faster." With a sigh, she set down her data pad. "The usual, then." "In other words, politics," Cale grumbled. "There are days I really miss the quiet life of a freight hauler." "Liar," she said, moving so close their shoulders almost brushed. "You've saved more people in the last 6 months than in your entire military career. Don't you dare pretend that doesn't mean the world to you." And she was right. Their initiative had already run dozens of missions, pulling survivors from collapsed mines, crippled ships, and planetary disasters. Every success earned them a little more trust, but the opposition on both sides never let up. "Station 7 checked in," he said, changing the topic. The earthquake response on Kepler 442b was a success. 38 survivors, a mix of human and Klasari colonists. Our team had 0 casualties. That was Cad's crew, right? Yeah, Kale said with a hint of pride. The kid's turning out to be a natural leader. He doesn't care if his people have scales, fur, or just plain skin. He only cares if they get the job done. Speaking of the job, Sarah began carefully, we have to talk about Earth. Kale's whole body went rigid. It was the one conversation they had been dodging for weeks, but he knew it was unavoidable. The Senate vote, she continued. It's in 3 days. If Senator Laurent's side wins, our initiative gets official backing from Earth, resources, people, and political protection. If the hardliners win, we lose half our human volunteers and probably get hit with sanctions. He finally turned to face her. You need to go back. Use your influence with the Empire to rally support. I can deal with the situation on Earth. We made a promise to see this through together, she reminded him. That was before I knew how much your absence was costing you back home. Voxim's messages are getting more frantic. My sister is handling things perfectly, she insisted. Yes, we have challenges, but nothing that forces me to abandon our work here. She paused, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Nothing that forces me to abandon you. Those words lingered in the air between them, heavy with a truth they had both carefully avoided. 6 months of working side by side, sharing close calls and quiet triumphs, had forged a bond far deeper than the gratitude and duty that first brought them together. Soraya, I know, she cut him off gently. I know every reason why this is a mess. A human and a Klasari. A queen and a disgraced soldier. The political fallout alone could bring down everything we've built, he finished for her. This whole initiative is balanced on a knife's edge because we present a united professional front. If anyone even suspects it's based on personal feelings. Personal feelings? She echoed with a sad laugh. Is that what you call it? Such a cold clinical term for something that keeps me up at night. But before he could find the right words, the comm system chimed. The emergency channel. Thorne here, he answered, his voice instantly shifting back to professional. Sir, we've got a major situation. It was Yuri, one of their human dispatchers. The passenger liner Celestial Dream just had a catastrophic decompression out near the Veal Nebula. 800 souls on board, mixed species. They're sending out a distress call to anyone who can hear it. How far out? Even at maximum speed, we're 12 hours away. But sir, the ship is drifting into Klasari territory. Admiral Choros has already declared it a restricted zone for all human ships. Kale locked eyes with Soraya, and in her golden gaze, he saw the same unwavering resolve he felt. Get both rescue ships prepped. Full emergency protocols. We launch in 30 minutes. Sir, the political blowback can sort itself out after we've saved those people. 30 minutes, Yuri. He ended the transmission and saw Soraya was already in motion, gathering her gear with an effortless, focused grace. Choros is going to use this to destroy us, she said, her hands never stopping. Let him try, Kale replied. We don't leave people to die just because it's politically messy. They reached the docking bay in 20 minutes, walking into a scene of organized chaos as 2 crews scrambled to prep for launch. Their rescue ships, unique hybrids of human and Klasari tech, were already humming with power. Listen up, Kale called out, his voice cutting through the noise. This is about to be the most important mission we have ever undertaken. 800 lives, a diplomatic minefield, and every government in the sector is watching, waiting for us to fail. If anyone wants to back out, now is the time to do it. Not a single person moved. Good. Team Alpha, you're with me on the Harmony. Team Beta, you're with Commander Soraya on the Unity. We stick to standard rescue procedures, with one new rule. We are going to run into military ships from both sides. You do not, under any circumstances, engage them. We are rescuers, not fighters. Is that clear? A chorus of "Clear, sir!" came back in a dozen different languages and accents. As they were about to board, Soraya grabbed his arm. "Kale, if this all goes sideways..." "It won't." "But if it does," she insisted. He placed his hand over hers. "Then we face it together, just like always." The flight to the Veal Nebula was a tense, 12-hour burn that pushed their ships to the absolute limit. Kale watched the incoming reports from the Celestial Dream, his worry growing with every update. The decompression wasn't an attack, just cosmic bad luck. A micrometeorite storm had shredded the hull. But the damage was critical. Life support was failing, power was unstable, and 800 terrified passengers were trapped inside. "Sir," his pilot, a young Klassari named Vex, announced, "Sensors are picking up military ships closing in on the liner's position. Looks like 3 Klassari destroyers and 2 Earth Coalition frigates." "Open a wideband channel," Kale ordered. The main view screen fractured into multiple windows. Admiral Choros appeared in one, his scarred face a mask of cold fury. In another, an Earth Coalition captain named Morrison looked just as stern. "Rescue vessels, this is Admiral Choros," the Klassari barked. "You are entering restricted military space. Turn around now." "That's a negative, Admiral," Kale answered, his voice perfectly level. "There are 800 civilians who require aid. We are commencing rescue operations." "Those civilians violated a sovereign border." "Those civilians are suffocating," Soraya's voice cut in sharply from the Unity. "Admiral, I'm ordering you to stand down and permit us to proceed." "With all due respect, Your Majesty," Choros sneered, "you gave up your authority when you started this little experiment. My orders come from the throne, which is currently occupied by your sister." "Then perhaps," a new voice said, clear and full of authority, "you ought to check for your latest orders, Admiral." The screen split again, revealing Princess Lyestra, Soraya's younger sister, seated on the shimmering crystal throne. She was young, but she carried herself with an undeniable power. "Your Highness," Choros stammered, caught completely off guard. "I have been monitoring this situation, Admiral," Lyestra stated. "The rescue ships have my explicit authorization to proceed. Any attempt to interfere will be treated as an act of treason." Choros's face turned a shade of deep purple. "Your Highness, your sister's radical influence is precisely why I am the Queen Regent and you are not." Lyestra cut him off, her voice like ice. "Stand down, Admiral. That is a direct order." The Klassari destroyers slowly began to pull away, but the Earthships held their ground. "Captain Morrison," Kale urged, "we are out of time." The captain's face was a war of conflicting emotions. "I have my orders from Earth Command. No engagement with joint operations until the Senate votes." "Sir," one of Morrison's officers shouted from off-screen, "life signs aboard the liner are dropping fast. At this rate, we'll lose a third of them in the next 2 hours." Morrison squeezed his eyes shut, the battle between duty and conscience playing out on his face. He opened them. "Earth vessels are standing down. Godspeed, Harmony. Proceed with the rescue." They reached the Celestial Dream with only minutes left. The liner looked like a great, dying whale in the dark, its lifeblood, its atmosphere, leaking from a dozen gaping wounds. Both rescue ships docked at the same time, and teams flooded into the crippled vessel. The chaos that followed was a beautiful, desperate dance. Human and Klassari rescuers moved as one, pulling passengers to safety without a moment's hesitation over what species they were. Kale found himself in the worst of the damage, where a group of terrified Klassari children were huddled around their human teacher. They were all sharing the last few working emergency air masks. "It's going to be all right," he said softly, handing out personal breathers. "We're here to get you out." One of the kids, a little girl who was tiny even for a Klassari, reached up and touched his helmet with her small fingers. "You're human," she whispered in wonder. "Is that going to be a problem?" he asked with a gentle smile. "No," she replied seriously. My teacher says humans and Clasari are supposed to be friends now. Then she looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. Are you friends with the Queen? Yes, he said, carefully lifting her into his arms. We are friends. The entire evacuation took 4 agonizing hours. 4 hours of fighting against failing systems, of making impossible choices, and of crew members from 2 different worlds risking their own lives for total strangers. By the time the last survivor was safely aboard the rescue ships, the Celestial Dream was nothing more than a cold, silent tomb adrift in space. But the final count was a miracle. 791 saved. 9 had been lost in the initial disaster, but not a single person died during the rescue. Harmony! Unity! This is Captain Morrison. The comm crackled to life. What you just did. It was extraordinary. I'm filing my full and unedited report with Earth Command. The Senate needs to see what you really accomplished out here today. We appreciate that, Captain, Cale said, the exhaustion finally hitting him. The trip back to their station, Haven, was quiet. The crews were completely focused on treating the survivors. It wasn't until they finally docked that the true impact of their mission became clear. The station was swarmed with media ships from dozens of worlds, all of them waiting. The cameras were swarming, all of them desperate for a shot of the impossible rescue, but Cale just waved them off. No comments, he told his team. Let the work speak for itself. As they were getting the last of the survivors onto the medical transports, a human woman timidly approached him. She was holding a small Clasari child, the very same one Cale had pulled from a collapsed section of the station. She wanted to say thank you, the woman said, her voice choked with tears. I'm her teacher. When the breach happened, I thought we were all gone. But then you came. A human and a Clasari, working side by side. You saved my kids, all of them. The little girl wiggled, reaching out with her tiny 3-fingered hands, and Cale instinctively took her into his arms. She mumbled something in her native tongue, too soft for his universal translator to pick up. She says you smell like hope, Soraya translated, appearing right beside him. That single, perfect moment was captured by every camera there. A human soldier, scarred from a dozen battles, gently holding an alien child while her human teacher cried tears of joy, and the Queen of the Clasari looked on, her regal composure completely broken by raw emotion. That picture would flash across the entire known galaxy in hours, becoming a symbol more powerful than any treaty or political speech. Later, back in the quiet of their shared quarters, Cale and Soraya just sat, wrapped in an exhausted silence. The rescue was a major win, but they both knew the real fight was just beginning. The Senate votes in 2 days, she finally said, breaking the quiet. And the Empire. Lystra is doing her best to hold the line, but some are using my long absence to undermine her. She paused, her gaze distant. I might have to go back soon, for good. The words hit Cale like a physical blow, even though he'd been dreading them for weeks. The initiative will keep going, of course, she continued. It's far too important to let it fail. But I might have to lead it from the throne, not from the field. She finally turned to look at him, her golden eyes searching his. Cale, what I said before, about keeping our personal feelings out of this. You were right, he cut in, his voice rough. This is bigger than us. Whatever we might want for ourselves, we can't jeopardize the mission. No, she said, her tone firm and clear. I was wrong. The initiative only works because it's personal. It works because you and I prove, every single day, that a real connection between our species is possible. Not just some professional alliance, but genuine care. She stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the blended streets of the city they called Haven. Do you remember what you told that little girl, when she asked what we were? Of course, he said. I told her we're friends. Is that what we are? she asked quietly. Friends? Kale got up and stood beside her at the window, staring at her reflection in the glass. I don't know what we are, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I just know that working with you these last few months has made me feel whole again. I know that when you're in danger, it feels like all the air gets sucked out of my lungs, and I know the thought of you leaving for the Empire and never coming back. It scares me more than any war zone ever did. She turned to face him then, and he could see unshed tears shining in her eyes. When I was trapped under that support beam, she began, I had given up. I'd accepted that I was going to die alone in that rubble. And then you showed up. This impossible human who didn't see an enemy queen, just someone who needed saving. You gave me my life back that day. And now 7 years later, you've given me something else. What? He asked. The chance to be more than just a queen, she said. The chance to just be Soraya, to matter as a person, not just as a symbol. She reached up, her fingertips gently brushing against his jaw. I know all the reasons why this is crazy. Different species, different worlds, a universe of politics between us. But Kale, A blaring emergency alarm shattered the moment into a million pieces. Instantly, they both snapped back into mission mode, their eyes darting to their comms units. Major breakthrough! Yuri's voice crackled over the speaker, electric with excitement. The Earth Senate moved the vote up. It just happened. The joint initiative passed. 63% in favor. We have full backing from Earth. They stared at each other, a wild mix of joy and shock warring with the heavy weight of what this really meant. Success was never simple. More resources meant more politics. More lives saved meant more enemies trying to tear them down. We should go talk to the teams, Soraya said, her voice already regaining its regal authority. But just for a second, Kale caught her hand before she could turn away. Soraya, he said, his voice low and urgent. After we make the announcement, we need to talk. Really talk. About us, about the future. About what's actually possible if we stop letting fear call the shots. She squeezed his hand, a whole lifetime of promises packed into that one simple gesture. Yes, she agreed. But first, let's go tell our people we just changed the universe, one rescue at a time. They walked out together, hands still linked, to share the news with their teams of humans and Klasari. When they made the announcement, the common area erupted into a chaotic, joyful celebration. Kale watched as former enemies hugged, laughed, and embraced like old friends and colleagues. In that moment, Kale felt a fundamental shift inside him. This was what they had built. It wasn't just an organization. It was a community. It wasn't just cooperation. It was a real connection. And right at the center of it all were two people who had found each other against impossible odds and simply refused to let go. As Soraya addressed the cheering crowd, laying out their new, expanded mission with Earth's full support, Kale watched her with a completely new perspective. Yes, she was a queen. And yes, he was a scarred-up ex-soldier with more baggage than a fleet of cargo haulers. But together, they were living proof that change, real change, was possible. To the future! Someone yelled when Soraya finished speaking. To the future! The crowd roared back, raising their glasses in a dozen different cultural toasts. Kale's eyes met Soraya's across the bustling room, and in her gaze, he saw his own thoughts, perfectly reflected. Whatever was coming next, political firestorms, the pressure of a rapidly expanding operation, the mind-bendingly complex task of navigating an impossible relationship, they would face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. The quiet revolution they had started in that throne room had blossomed into something neither of them could have ever fully imagined. It wasn't just a rescue service anymore. It was a bridge between worlds. It wasn't just a professional partnership. It was a bond that shattered every boundary their species had ever built. And here, in a neutral city under the light of 3 pale suns, surrounded by people who had learned to see past their differences, the future suddenly felt less like a distant dream and more like a promise just waiting to be kept.